Okay, I'm gonna start the music then, if I can find it. We'll do this one for now. Maybe. Alright, I think it started. Yeah, I can hear it. Alright, so we probably need a bit of a recap, yes?
Yeah.
So, last time we picked up with this party on Yoon. We immediately jumped into a big old fight with a creature that used to be a doppelganger. Past tense, apparently. After a fight in the waterways below Srenmore, finding out that this creature was very sick, and Dodie suggesting it's probably not a great idea to kill it in the water supply, you guys managed to beat it to a pulp, one might say, and then Gore just chucked it over the fence of the Cromthier's place in the grotto beneath Srenmore. After that, you guys got your things together and made your way over to where Jen was on the opposite side of the city with her family, which is one of the mobs, and asked her if maybe you guys could acquire passage further west. There we go. She said that, they had a way to get closer, but not to Port Paith, the direction that you're attempting to go. But that it would definitely get you about 2 or 3 days outside the city. You guys went through a giant portal box thing of some sort and popped out in the woods near Port Paith and stayed the night in a treehouse owned by Jen's family mob business people. Oldet came with you, and some dreams were had by a couple different people. Saphael and Dodie apparently having the same dream and learning that afterward, while Gore had yet another deep, dark ocean dream that ended with him coughing up a lot of seawater. And I believe we ended last session with you guys getting back on the road in the morning, making your way over towards Port Paith, yes? Did I miss anything? It's a relatively simple session last time. This music is very dramatic. I'm going to change it. Let's try this one. Maybe. Yeah, sure. Why not? So, we pick back up in the morning after you guys have spent the night in this treehouse. The morning is pretty cold given the season that you're in, getting into the later months of the year, and having woken up so early. The sun has barely risen by this point, and you can see there is a bit of frost and dew both coating the leaves and the trees and the grass around you. The trees here seem pretty thick, creating a dense forest in your path. And from where the sun is rising, you can tell the direction that you need to head in, considering Port Paith, from your current stance as you know it, is just directly west. You guys have gotten up and gotten your things together. Some of you have already climbed down the small rope ladder onto the ground from the treehouse. You don't have a cart or a horse, but it seems that there's not really much room in this forest anyway for one. And you know, based on what Jen's cousin, though you never got her name, said, that you're about 2 to 3 days outside the city. As you all get up, some of you having a little bit more restful sleep than others, you've gathered your things, and I'm assuming that we're going to start out in figuring the best path to go. So, is anybody kind of more awake than others at this point? Is anybody kind of taking charge as you guys climb down this rope ladder?
I think they get up. She starts, like, assessing the direction of the sun and the path of the wind and, you know, trail.
How pliable the trees are, the dust quality. Exactly. Would you like to make a survival check?
Yeah, I would love to do that. You know, current humidity percentage. All that good stuff.
Of course.
That's a 10.
Delicious.
It's a base 2.
Oh, I love that. You climb down out of the treehouse. You can see Oldet is off to the side, still kind of doing a couple stretches, having kind of flipped over the railing and lowered themselves to the ground. Gore has climbed down as well, and Erithar, you kind of takes you a second to get down the ladder without it fully swinging out from under you, because it is very tiny compared to all of you. Saphael does kind of like fall down the last couple rungs of the ladder, but lands on his feet, thankfully, and is kind of just like looking around to make sure nobody noticed. Everyone noticed. But, you know, he's hopeful. But Dodie, you kind of walk off to the side, feeling the crisp air around you, the breeze that's picking up. It's kind of cloudy above you, not full rain clouds or anything, but just, you know, enough to kind of cast a breeze around you. And as you're starting to look around in the direction that you need to go, you know for certain, because the sun is rising in one direction, that the other direction is definitely west. But all of the trees around you look exactly the same, so you're not entirely sure if there's a trail or if these mob halflings just kind of wing it each time. But you know the direction that you're supposed to go. Whether that ends up on a trail or not, we'll find out.
Awesome. I think, with that lovely information in mind, she's going to pick the least obscured by trees, straight line headed west.
Nice.
Start guiding her party down.
Nice. You guys get on the road, per se, relatively easily. Though the trees are very dense here, there's not a lot of change in altitude, so you're not having to go around different boulders and go around different hills and cliffs and stuff like that. Every once in a while there is a very large stone that seems to be just kind of embedded into the ground around you, but they're pretty easy to navigate around, and you slowly start your trek for the day. Speaking of which, is there a certain order that everyone's walking in during this time? And would anyone like to roll for the day? Just jumping right into it.
I can roll for the day. I assume is Sapphire right behind Dodie?
Probably, yeah.
Or yeah, Aerithor will be behind Sapphire. 15.
Or we'll be next to Oldet.
Alright. You've kind of got Dodie up towards the front, leading the way, keeping track of where the sun is now steadily rising. Sapphire is kind of lingering near Dodie, but kind of off to the side near some of the trees, and is definitely kind of like doing that thing where you kind of pick a leaf off a tree and fold it up and crunch it together and tear it into pieces and then drop it. And it's just kind of doing that continuously, seemingly a little bit lost in thought, given, the dream that just happened. But Erithar, you follow pretty easily behind the two of them, while Gore, you and Oldet kind of linger behind, walking slowly behind the rest of the group. You said 15?
Yes.
Interesting. But you guys get going for the day. It seems that the kind of passage through this part of the continent doesn't seem particularly difficult. Given the places that you've walked through or traveled through recently, it's honestly a little bit of a nice change. The forest that you went through trying to get to Srenmore was increasingly more difficult than this, which just kind of seems like a little jaunt through a park, honestly. Though you do hear the wind starting to pick up around you and the clouds above starting to get a little bit denser. Is there anything you guys are doing while you're walking or thinking about just in general while this kind of goes? This day of travel is mostly pretty easy considering where you are, so... Alright. You guys continue on. At a certain point, Saphael has gotten bored of tearing up leaves, as well as you guys have gotten a little bit more into where more of the pine trees are, and the pine needles aren't as fun to tear up. Gore, you notice at a certain point that Oldet does, start rooting around in their bag at a certain point, and, pulls out what looks like a bottle of ink, and uncaps it, and sniffs it, as if they're checking to make sure that it's still good, which doesn't make sense to you since it's ink, and then puts the cap back on it, and puts it away, and pulls out a different bottle of ink, and does the same, and does that for about 5 different bottles of ink. But you keep walking. And you keep walking. And you keep walking. And it's getting to be around midday when you guys are starting to remember how boring it is when you can't sit on a cart and you're just having to walk. The wind starts to pick up a little bit, howling through the branches of the trees, and these pine trees and various other kind of bushes and underbrush are starting to creak and sway in this wind. As well, it's starting to get colder. You know that you've traveled just a little bit south of where Srenmore was, but the wind seems to have a stronger chill to it here. As if the wind gets steadily stronger and stronger the further west you go. At a certain point, some of you kind of start to pull your cloaks and jackets and coats a little bit further around you. And at a certain point, Gore, you watch as the wind blows one of Oldet's kind of still a little bit too big and too floppy for their being up at a different angle, and it gets stuck for a second, and they have to swat it back into place. But you continue on walking. And then the wind starts to get a little bit ridiculous. And it's starting to get a little annoying. And though you have all kind of been traveling in silence by this point, you're all starting to notice everybody else's frustration as the wind starts to get so strong that you're having to push against it to walk through the trees. Dodie, if I could get you to make another survival check for me.
You got it, boss. Okay, that's a 21.
21. All right. After a little bit of time, you start to see where some of the trees get thinned out. And despite this rushing, icy by this point, wind around you, you do manage to find what looks like probably a real trail. There's a little bit of a divot carved into the dirt, and the trees are a little bit wider apart than probably is necessary. And you start to follow down that path. Of course, the wind here seems even stronger outside of the cover of the trees, but you continue on. It starts to get around 2 p.m. by the time that you notice the slight change in scenery. Instead of going from this nearly flat land of forest and trees and occasional boulders, you start to see where the land starts to curve up more into kind of protrusions of rock. Not quite full cliff faces, but instead as if the plates of the earth had just kind of shifted slightly and just exposed through the dirt. Instead, there are these large rocky formations, different striations of color in them that you kind of start to weave and pass between. You would take the time to appreciate them, as they are honestly kind of beautiful, except for the fact that the wind is absolutely howling between them by this point. It's starting to get a little bit more humid out, and the frustration of the now wet ground around you is also starting to add up. What started as a very nice beginning of the morning and a kind of calm, peaceful atmosphere is just getting to be this wet, cold, gross day, and it's starting to wear down on you. Eventually, what just becomes the cherry on top is the fact that it starts to rain.
Mm.
And that rain is ice cold. Dodie, you've managed to find on this pathway the easiest way to kind of dip between these like kind of rocky overhangs, and you managed to stay out of the rain for the most part in these couple of sections, but you guys are still kind of trekking through the mud by this point. Are you guys doing anything differently as you're going, or are we just kind of huffing it?
Just a way to keep feet as dry as possible. Specifically feet, but you know.
I just huff in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Huffing.
Gore pulls out a can of spray paint. Just Oldette has started to look like a drowned rat by this point. And Saphael's kind of barely wavy hair is now just slicked down on the sides of his face. His grub worm potion thing, also, for a thing that doesn't really have a face, does not appear happy by this either. As every once in a while, Dodie, you swear you hear like an incredulous little squeak from it. But you continue on further. It gets to be about 2:30 by the time you start to notice that the droplets of rain are starting to hit a little bit harder. And then those droplets of rain that seem to pelt onto you get a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, until eventually you find yourself in the middle of a hailstorm. These now, like probably between the sizes of a pea and a golf ball, suddenly striking into the rocks and the trees around you, causing them to creak and sway as the wind still does not seem to relent whatsoever. Those little droplets of rain suddenly turn into just like as if somebody is flicking you on your shoulder and over your arms as hard as they can, up until the point where, let's see, Gore, you just catch a golf ball-sized hailstone directly into the back of the neck. It makes you stumble forward a little bit, and you swear you're going to have just a perfectly round bruise there. The hail is also starting to pick up again, as if it's getting harder and larger. And in front of you, you do have a couple different avenues where the trail starts to split off. How are you guys navigating this now incessant just pelting of ice on top of you?
I'll say Dodie's starting to get pissed off. Maybe if the path is branching off, does it look like there's one route that has a little bit more tree cover than the others, perhaps?
Would you like to make a perception check or investigation check for me?
Let's go with investigation.
I'll do a follow-up investigation to that, just to make sure that whatever path we're taking is still the right way.
Okay.
It's not leading us any differently.
Go for it.
That's right. That was an 18.
18, all right.
Oh, 13. Not
13.
terrible, but not
Nice.
great. Yeah.
Dodie, you catch a golf ball-sized hailstone directly into the top of your shoulder, where it bounces off your armor and hits the side of your face a little bit. Definitely wakes you up some, as if it's not ice cold and raining already. And you start to notice as these little pea-sized pieces of hail seem to have disappeared completely, and you are now suddenly being pelted at top speeds by these golf balls. It's starting to get painful as you start to kind of walk up to where the trail splits off, and you start to kind of like desperately try to find a place that seems the best to kind of veer off into. You check down the first two, and it somehow gets even more open down those, until you come across the third one, where you can see another one of those large rock formations seems to overhang over a good bit of the trail in front of you. Erithar, you are now closely following behind Dodie, as Saphael has stopped in his tracks to kind of try to cover his grub from getting absolutely squashed, just obliterated by these hailstones.
I will say he's holding his bag above his head, and if Saphael's close enough, he'll like do this number as well. I'm just holding it just above his head, looking absolutely pissed off and, cold.
Yeah. Your arms are kind of like shaking a little bit by the absolute force that these pieces of ice are nailing into your bag above you, but you kind of follow behind Dodie with Saphael, who's trying to cover Steve as much as possible, and you do see that the path that Dodie seems to be kind of like motioning everyone down is still in the direction that you need to go. The two on the very opposite sides of you seem to kind of almost curve back, but at least these two in front of you seem to vaguely go in the right direction. I'm assuming that you start to very quickly make your way that way. If I could get dexterity checks from everyone as the hail continues to pick up more and more and more around you. I had a sound effect for the hailstorm, but it doesn't work.
16.
16?
Mm-hmm.
5.
5.
22.
Alright. Well, Dodie and Oldette are the only ones that didn't make that save. As you all begin to start nearly running down this path towards this overhang of rock, as the wind and the storm above you seems to pick up even more, these bits of golf ball-sized hailstones are now starting to get a little bit larger and a little bit larger, until at one point, Gore, as you're running behind everyone, you watch probably like a small cantaloupe-sized piece of ice just crash directly in front of you. You all continue to run, and as Dodie, you begin to usher people in behind you now underneath this piece of stone. You manage to catch a about softball-sized piece of ice directly into the side of your neck as it kind of comes down at an angle, and you take 3 points of bludgeoning damage as it just smashes into the side of you. Oldette runs up behind Gore, and you watch as Oldette just gets absolutely fucking nailed between the shoulder blades by a very large piece of ice and goes skittering across the mud and nearly falls to their knees underneath the stone as they also take 3 points of bludgeoning damage. Outside,
she curses very loudly and very aggressively when it hits her, and then helps Oldette out of the mud.
Understandable. Now, as you are all standing underneath this overhang, this almost kind of cliff made out of these protruding pieces of stone, you watch as outside this little cover that you have, the trees start to break off branches as the storm grows larger and larger and more fierce around you. This bit of stone continues on for a little bit longer, about 40 feet ahead of you, before again it just kind of opens up into the barest bit of tree cover. You're not entirely sure how long the hailstorm will go on for, but you have a moment to collect yourselves and decide if you're willing to try to make it through that, or if you want to try to wait it out. Oldette is now slicking the mud off of themselves and kind of wiping it on the stone wall to try to get it off of their fur as much as possible.
Is it what you said last time earlier? The last time you said was 2 p.m. Is it how much later is it?
It's
now?
getting to be about 3 p.m. by this point. The storm picked up very quickly.
I think Gorgeous sits down. Yeah, this sucks.
It's still not too terribly late in the day if we want to give it an hour or two to see if it will blow over.
I have no qualms stopping.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like maybe it's the best idea to keep going. I don't know, though. Wipes mud onto the stone again.
Eritha's gonna sit on one side of Gore and go through his bag to make sure that everything's dry.
Mm-hmm. You pull open your bag and start to root through it a little bit. There's a couple pieces of spare clothing that you had, kind of your old shirt that you're still holding on to in case you need it, that is starting to get a little damp around the edges, but everything within the middle is definitely pretty sturdy and dry, including your journal, which you had kind of shoved into the middle, which still, so far, seems to be keeping its integrity.
He's doing that.
All right.
Dodie kind of sits under the overhang and starts pulling sopping wet, tangled curls on top of her head with the knowledge that, God, that's gonna suck later, but that's a problem for later.
Yeah.
And trying very hard to stop herself from killing something.
Saphael sits kind of off to the side and starts trying to wring out his hair a little bit as it is just dripping everywhere. As Oldette has managed to get most of the mud off of themselves and is now finding a place to sit down as well, kind of nearer to Gore and where Erithar is. The hail continues on for what feels like a decent amount of time, though Dodie especially, is probably just impatience. At a certain point, Saphael does kind of summon this violin again and just kind of starts to really, really quietly, very obviously trying not to disrupt anyone, kind of pick along the strings a little bit over by himself, just kind of getting acquainted with the strings of the instrument. But the three of you and Oldette off to the side are kind of left for a moment. The hail continues, and it seems like you're going to be here for at least an hour or two. Is there anything you guys are doing as this kind of realization settles in a little bit?
Pulls out his journal and angrily writes,
Fucking hate hail. Hail's stupid. I hate it.
Hail? More like
Probably.
boo.
Probably
Hail, more like, why the
doesn't
hell was this
journal.
created?
probably just sits there and keeps an eye on the weather.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to make a perception check for me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Oh, well. That's an 11, I think. Yeah, that's an 11.
It's pretty hard to see outside with the absolute barrage of ice and the creaking and bending trees around you. It's not a very friendly sight, let's say, as the destruction of these giant pieces of ice just crash into the mud and splatter it everywhere. But you attempt to keep an eye out around that, kind of past this like almost sheet of gray and white that is starting to obscure your vision. It's not fun, and it sure does just really make the day just even that much better. But you wait for a while. Oldet, at a certain point, does seem to get kind of impatient as well. Next to you, Gore, you see where they kind of start to play with the edge of their bag and kind of get up and stretch a little bit more. Kind of starts to eye the absolute silence that the party is sitting in and kind of like looks at you every once in a while and looks at everybody else. At a certain point, you notice where where Oldet looks up and makes eye contact with Saphael across this little patch of rock, and they just kind of nod to each other and go back to whatever they're doing. Eventually, Oldet sits down next to you and is like, "So, I don't know."
Gore leans over. Don't worry, I'll get used to it.
I'm just saying it's kind of weird. But, you know, to each their own. You know me, though. I'm gonna go crazy if I just sit here. I'm gonna do something. And starts to root through their bag. Erithar, you're probably close enough that you see they also pull out a journal. It's a little bit different than you and Gore's, as it seems to more just be a flap of leather with a bunch of pages stuffed into it, held together by a couple pieces of twine. And as they pull it out, it kind of drops to the ground, and they put down a quill with it. The quill, by the way, all the fluffy parts of the feather completely gone. It is just kind of the stick at this point. And then they start rooting around again, and what really comes to your attention, in particular, is that after they set down this journal onto the slightly damp stone, with all these crumpled bits of paper, they then pull out that embroidered bag that you know contains the cabochon in it. They set the bag down onto the stone and then sit down crisscross applesauce and open up their journal and start to scribble frantically in it as if they just have the worst handwriting in the world.
He is watching, like, their every move. Like, I think at first when they pull out the book, he just kind of looks over just to see what's happening and sees the way that it looks and the way things are stuffed in and everything. And I think just every movement they make, he's just following them. And no, he's not going to do that. He's no, he's not going to do that. When they pull the cabochon out in the bag, because they don't pull it out of the bag, they just pull the bag out.
Yeah, it's like a drawstring type bag, and they've grabbed the bag by like the top of it and just kind of set it down onto the stone in front of them.
Yeah. I think he definitely sits up a little straighter and just watches what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. You kind of sit there for a moment and watch as they start to scribble in this makeshift journal of theirs. And they flip a couple pages back into like other stuff that they've written and kind of read over it and kind of like make a face to themselves and then flip back to where they were writing. Could I actually get you to make a perception check for me?
Yeah. That's what I thought it was. Okay. 17. Yep.
As you kind of off to the side, glancing over, watch them start to scribble in this journal, they kind of pull their knees up to their chest a little bit and rest it on their knees and scribble atop it. You kind of peer over a little bit more, kind of trying to very nonchalantly get a look at what they're writing, and your eyes almost seem to like have to like double time to focus on it, as it doesn't look like they're writing words. You've seen a lot of languages, you've seen a lot of different scripts, and you've seen quite a few different books and libraries that have contained languages that you've barely heard of. But they all tend to follow some sort of pattern in the letters in the script that it's written in. As you kind of peer over at what they're writing, it just looks like a page full of just chicken scratch. It's a little odd to you, but they continue writing as if they know what they're thinking and what they're putting down.
Pardon me. I don't intend to pry, but I'm very curious as to what sort of script you're writing your studies in.
Oh, this?
Yeah, I've just know. Yes, you're writing. It looks horrendous, but I can tell it's not really any sort of language. But it looks so horrendous it might be intentional. And I'm just a bit curious about that.
Yeah. So, like, initially, I wasn't really taught language. So when I got taken in, I kind of had to, like, make up my own before I eventually, like, learned to read. Now I know, like, a couple different languages, but, like, at first, like, whoopsies. So I just kind of had to make up my own. So this is just kind of, like, I know it doesn't really look like a language, but, like, it makes sense to me.
You're just telling me that this is a script of your own creation.
Yeah.
It's actually quite brilliant.
Thank you.
How much does Aerithar know about gnolls?
Make either a history check or... Ooh, actually. Let me let my computer load. Make either a history check or a... insight check.
What the hell is that? Oh my god, the lighting in my room is so weird tonight. I'm doing these dice, so from where I'm sitting, I can barely see the numbers. You said history or insight?
Yes.
Oh my god, his history is way better than his insight. Dirty 20.
Aerithar doesn't know a ton about gnolls. To be honest, now that he's starting to think about it, he's never really heard a lot of discussion about gnolls at all. Especially on the other continents, gnolls aren't really indigenous to that area to begin with. But what he does know about them is what is like the baseline information that most people talk about, which is that gnolls don't really have a society. That they're from the northern parts of Diremount mostly, though they have been known to appear on very specific parts of, like, the wilds near Pyrsana. But for the most part, they exist in a very small portion of Diremount and aren't really seen very often, except for when, to put it in a lack of better terms, they're being hunted down. It's kind of believed that gnolls don't really have a society or a set standard of, like, community. And most of the times that gnolls are written about in books and stuff like that, they aren't engaging in conversation or being a part of the towns around where they're found. They're more so stealing or hunting or generally being shooed out of places. More so like creatures than they are like people. It does kind of make sense, now that he's thinking about it, why Oldet wouldn't know how to read or write to begin with. Because why would they? If that makes sense.
Does. Might I ask how old you were when you began to devise this language?
Let me check something. I don't have that pulled up.
I was about... What was I, like 7? Maybe it was 7? Hold on, let me count. Yeah, probably about 7.
And you were taught other languages by, I'm going to assume, other monks?
Yeah.
Or... It's not just common, you know other ones as well? Can I just ask?
Yeah, my common obviously is the easiest one. I know like a couple phrases in Elvish. Let's see. I mean, kind of just like doing like keeper stuff. Since I'm a keeper, you kind of have to pick up a little bit in like elemental tongues and stuff like that. But those are like more like baseline type things. I know like a couple phrases or like how to get by in like a couple different languages, but like the only one I can like speak like fluently is Common.
So you don't know Draconic?
Nah, not really. I could probably look at something and be like, yeah, that's Draconic, but...
Interesting. That's very fascinating. You're not going to take that out of the bag, are you? You're just going to leave it
Well, I was
sitting
going to...
there. You were going to. Why were you going to?
Because I sometimes, depending on the time of day, when you shake it, it makes a different noise. So I've been like tracking like what times of day it makes the other noise, so I was gonna take it out for a second and shake it and then put it back.
Oh, a continuous study.
Yeah.
Do you mind at some point sharing your recordings with me?
Sure.
I'm not going to give them to anybody. I just like it for myself.
Yeah. I can kind of, like, show you some of the stuff that I've, like, already kind of figured out about it. If you want, since, I mean, we're sitting here. But I'm gonna shake it real quick.
Right. He's gonna get up and go over on the other side of Gord next to Oldat, kind of digging in his journal. As he does, he kind of looks over at Gore, just a very interested look. Right at Gore, and goes over to sit on the other side of Oldat.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued what Gore is doing in this moment.
He's just still journaling. Fucking hate Hale. Hale's so fucking stupid.
Drawing a piece of hail and scratching it out a bunch of times. You see Oldet open up the bag and take out this strange stone, metal, question mark, whatever, kind of holds it up near one of their ears and shakes it a little bit. And Erithar, you kind of listen in as well, as initially when they shake it, it makes that initial sound that you heard before, that kind of hollow sound as if something is clinking around on the inside of a geode or something. And then as they shake it for a second, after it gets to about 30 seconds, you start to hear it ping around as if it's a small, like, ball bearing hitting on the inside of a pipe. The sound itself continues to be hollow, but as if the material has shifted suddenly. They stop, and they kind of look up and then look over at you, like, see what I'm talking about?
And it does a different sound depending on the time of day?
Well, like, most of the time it sounds like, like a stone trapped inside of a stone. And then sometimes it sounds like that, where it's like a piece of metal trapped inside of a piece of metal. And then sometimes it's really only like 3 different sounds. Sometimes you shake it, and it's as if the stone inside just kind of stops pinging around. It's only ever been those 3, though, and they start to put it back in the bag as they look up, and you see across from you where the hail is starting to slow down just slightly, that one of the trees has suddenly gained about 2 feet in height. And they put it back in the bag and tie it back up. So I've been kind of trying to keep track of, like, when it does that versus when it does the other thing. It doesn't... There's a lot of it that kind of, like, makes sense to me in theory, but doesn't really make sense in practice. Because, like, most of the time, stuff that's dropped in Periorc storms tends to be very literal. She's a pretty straightforward goddess. And so the things that she tends to drop tends to only do one thing. And, like, Periorc storms, they're, like, big and unexpected, and they don't follow weather patterns, and they, like, they're intentionally chaotic and stuff like that. But you really only get truly misunderstood ones when there's another type of magic that gets caught up in it. So, this was dropped, if it was a Periorc storm, it was dropped for a reason. But so far the reason isn't very apparent. I've got theories, but I'm trying to keep track of all the details about it in case I'm missing something.
Also to narrow it down,
Yeah.
I would assume.
Because, like, it's obviously not a very, it's pretty unassuming. They hold up the bag. It's pretty unassuming, and like, you know, like plant growth, like whatever, except for the fact that it's what it is. So like, you gotta be particular about it. Which is why I don't want it to go to certain places.
That's, not super. You would know more than I would about all of that. I'm mostly interested in it for the arcane purposes and such. One of the reasons why I'm tagging along is because I'm not very knowledgeable about divine studies.
Yeah, I mean,
With such a advanced and mysterious artifact, it is very impressive that any one person has been able to narrow down as much information as you have.
not a lot of people care. And the people that do care tend to care for the wrong reasons. So, you know, there's like... I mean, I guess it's kind of like... kind of in my job description. Kind of.
As a keeper.
Yeah.
Mm. You're a keeper of Periorc knowledge?
Yeah, for Periorc, you tend to be a keeper of the chaos. But you know, like... different, like, you know, temples have different roles for monks and stuff like that. Periorc doesn't really tend to have a lot of set roles, except for, you know, like, you've got monk, you've got keeper, you've got abbot. Versus, like, some of the other temples which have, like, way stricter type shit.
Makes sense. Yes, well, at some point when we're not out in the hail, but when we're, you know, indoors, I would appreciate just a transfer of some of the knowledge.
Yeah.
Just for my own records.
Yeah. I would show it to you, but it wouldn't make sense, so I can translate it or something.
Yeah, either. Whatever your preference is, it's your language, apparently. Is Dodie listening to this at all? Or is she just... yeah.
She's not really engaging. She's very much like, first of all, letting Aerithar have a little moment. And B, just kind of like absorbing what's being said.
He definitely, he looks over at her briefly a few times, especially when Oldette is like, I made this language, and looks over at her like, but, kind of puts his stuff away as that conversation comes to an end.
Mm-hmm. Oldette scribbles down a couple more things, fills up basically the entire rest of the page that they're working on before they start to put it away, and start to reorganize their stuff in their bag to make room for the stone going back inside. After a little bit longer of you guys sitting there, it gets to be about an hour and a half, 2 hours of you guys sitting there and doing nothing, and it gets on to be closer towards 2.5 hours when the hail finally turns back into just like a little dribble of rain, and eventually starts to seem to slow down enough to stop. You've got a little bit of sunlight left in the day, but not a ton, where you guys can still make a little bit of progress if you so wish.
think when like the hail is definitely gone, it's just kind of like she reaches her little hand up to kind of get a sense of how much rain there is. Do we want to keep going for a little bit longer?
I think that using what we have left of the day is more wise than giving up early. We still have enough time before it gets dark.
Pretty rested too. We can maybe push it a little bit later than we usually would.
Gore, do you concur?
Nope. He closes his journal and stands up. I'm ready to go.
So yes, you concur. Is concur means agree, right? Jesus
Yes.
Christ.
Yeah.
So yes, you concur.
He says that.
Oh my god.
You all gather your things, getting your stuff together, and making your way back out onto the now very muddy trail. You continue on walking for a little bit longer, and if I can get just one more survival check from you, Dodie, since
You got it, Bob.
the trail has changed quite a bit now that it's been annihilated with ice.
23.
23. Nice. You continue on further. The walk now a little bit more difficult as you're stomping through mud, but luckily the rain eventually stops and you're again just left with this every once in a while really chill breeze that rolls through. The clouds relent slightly, and as it starts to get towards sunset, you can see actually now between some of the clouds, and you get those last little rays of sunlight before eventually it disappears beyond the horizon. And you're walking through this muddy trail again in relative darkness. You guys said you wanted to push it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
You guys continue walking for a little bit longer after sunset. As the sun seems to set earlier and earlier by each day as the months get further into winter. But you continue on, walking a little bit further and a little bit further. At a certain point, you guys have to kind of avoid this like mud patch that still has like chunks of melting ice in it, but you manage to get back on track and back onto the trail relatively easily. By the time it is pitch black outside, you're walking a little bit further, and the wind starts to pick up again, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep track of the trail. Eventually,
When
Dodie...
it starts getting... When it starts getting like a little bit like dark and hard to see, she picks up a rock off the side of the trail, casts light on it, and hands it to Gore.
Nice. You take this beacon, and you manage to get a little bit further down the trail. Eventually, it starts to get colder and colder as the night starts to set in. And after probably another close to 2 hours of walking, you find another one of these kind of like overhang areas. Not quite a cave, but just enough of a shelter to keep most of the water and the mud out. And now that it's getting further into the night, so far at least, unless you guys want to push even further, it seemed like the best stopping point.
Let's stay dry.
Yeah.
You guys veer off the trail slightly into this kind of pre-made shelter and start to set about your things for the evening. Are any of you guys doing anything in particular?
Setting up bed mat to a place where it is, dry, where we are, where it's dry. Yeah.
will probably be doing the same.
Okay.
He kind of looks to the group. I don't mind staying up again. For first watch. So.
I mean, I also don't mind, or I don't know. I don't know what's happening. There seems to be something.
Well, do you want to stay up with me?
Wait, what was that?
Mr. Gore, do you want to stay up with me, or do you want to go ahead and go to sleep?
Glances over at Odette. I'll watch with you. And sits down on his bedroll.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, that is so weirded out by you guys. They're like... You guys...
Why are you not talking to each other?
You guys start to set up your area for the night. Gore, Arathar sitting a little bit closer towards the edge where you have a better view of the forest and everything. Oldet kind of sets up their kind of makeshift bedroll. It's kind of a bedroll, kind of just like a bunch of fabrics and pelts sewn together that they just kind of throw out and lay on. But you see, as they settle in for the night, before they officially go to sleep, I'd say Dodie and Arathar, it kind of stands out a little to you, as it's quite different from Gore's nightly routine, as Oldet goes and sits down, kind of looks around, faces away from everyone, and then seems to meditate for about 30 to 45 minutes before officially going off to bed.
Good for them.
After they do so,
I love them.
you watch as they, again, scribble down frantically about 4 more pages in their little notebook thing, and then officially turn in for the night. They kind of lay down in bed and then kind of sit up after a little bit, and then seem to gnaw on some jerky that they pull out of their bag from somewhere, and then officially kind of settle in for the night. Saphael finds a place that's relatively easy to lay out his stuff for, kind of walks over to the wall, like stone wall closest to where he'll be sleeping, and takes his little potion grub and sticks him to the wall like usual, and kind of makes sure that he's really on there, and then goes back over to where he's settling in for the night as well. So
Dodie settles down next to him, not worrying about restraining herself, and goes to sleep.
yeah, you roll out your bed mat, look at the stakes and restraints that you have in your bag, and then just kind of close your bag and lay down. It's still really weird. You're not entirely sure what to do with your arms, but you manage to find like a pretty good position. And you fall asleep surprisingly easily. So, Gore and Arathar, after a little bit of everybody settling in, eventually you hear the breathing of your party members seem to regulate and come to this normal, standard, sleeping tone. So,
I think he starts off by he pulls his journal out, and before he was kind of adding on to things about the new Capuchon, the new Bachon, if you will. I didn't like that one. Anyway,
that feels like a 2011 Xbox Live insult.
he actually pulls out his journal to kind of add on to like real notes, and he wasn't going to for the day. He blurbs about the storm. He starts a new page about gnolls, and he writes down what he knows and leaves enough room on like a page and a half, and then in the next page makes a subsection about old debt.
This
And kind of assorted other things just to kind of start off the watch.
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and roll perception though,
Yes.
while Tyler's.
I think Gore's done enough journaling for the day, so he just kind of wanders off to train a little bit, and then probably just comes back and sits down on his bedroll.
What was your perception check?
15.
All right. You wander off into the forest, Gore, just off to the side, still close enough that you can kind of still see the overhang and your party members. You think about for a moment punching more wet trees, because the trees are pretty wet, but then the closer you get, the more you start to notice the first little bits of frost on things and think, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that'd be a bad idea. And instead go about your usual routine. You do manage to step directly into one little patch of ice-cold mud for a second, but you walk around enough that you manage to get most of it off, though it does completely wake you up. But you go about your routine and eventually make your way back over to where your camp is for the night and settle back down on your bedroll. Erithar, you start to kind of keep a watch out around as Gore goes about punching the air and doing push-ups and various things. Not a lot really to see. It seems that the storm was probably so far the most eventful thing that this day could bring you, but you're still a little paranoid, as you well should be, so you keep an eye out in general. Life recently has not been simple, so as much as you want the storm to be the last thing, you do intend to keep your perception up.
He's kind of looking up every now and then, and as Gore kind of comes back and sits down, he's approaching the kind of tail end of his notes, but he's still adding a couple of details, and it's a couple of minutes of silence. Are you self-taught?
Huh?
In Draconic. Are you self-taught? Or did you learn from someone?
I just kind of know it.
Like, as you got older, it just made sense? Did you come out of whatever and start talking in just Draconic? Or was it just something that you slowly began to realize that you knew over time?
One day I knew Draconic.
Probably a subconscious thing, then. It was just interesting. I was talking to your friend. I assume they're your friend.
Yeah.
And they just mentioned the languages that they knew, and Draconic wasn't one of them, so I was just curious.
I think by this point, Gore stands up and goes to sit next to Erithar. No, they don't know Draconic.
Do they know that you know Draconic, or is it something?
I'm not sure.
Is it something that you feel like you need to keep hidden? Or is it just like you just felt compelled to bring it up?
No, I've just never brought it up.
That makes more sense for you. I have a question. I have another question. I already asked you a question. Multiple of them. I have a new subset of questions. The fact that we are not going to the place where you had originally intended to deliver the cabochon is upsetting to you. Or this is stressful. This is some degree of negative energy or emotion, I assume.
Yeah.
Is this negative in the sense that this is just a very it's a personal qualm that you have with yourself that you are unable to fulfill the mission? Or when you're referring to deep shit, is there going to be a problem? Is there the possibility of there being a problem?
Well, if your boss asks you to do something, and then you don't do it, how do you think that would make them feel?
Well, traditionally, you would just be fired.
Uh-huh.
But I suppose it's the sort of position that you've ended up in.
Uh-huh.
Is this a matter of life and death? Is this a hypothetical life and death situation if this comes up again? The people in Hiva that you were going to take the cabochon to, is there a chance that this is a life and death situation and they will leave Hiva and pursue the cabochon, or particularly you? And therefore us.
Maybe.
I'm not sure. Is this something that once we're off the continent, we don't have to worry about anymore? It's just going to be out of sight, out of mind. I don't like that face.
No.
What is it? Because... No. Okay. No.
Is that him laughing?
That makes sense. I don't need to know your entire life story. And after we deliver the cabochon safely to wherever it needs to be, I don't particularly care what happens in general. I just don't. Whatever happens, happens. As long as this is safe, that's fine. But beforehand, if there is something that is going to endanger our lives, and therefore the safety of the cabochon as well, I would very much like to know what it is.
Or leans in really close. I'll tell you under one condition.
Okay.
Glances over. You can't tell Dodie.
I will not tell Dodie. Depending on what it is.
You swear on it?
Do I what?
Do you swear on it?
I swear on it. I'm not going to.
He
But
spits in his
I'm
palm
also.
and holds it out.
What the hell is that?
Do you swear on it?
I do swear on it. I'm not going.
Yeah.
I'm not going to touch your saliva with
Come
my
on.
hand.
Well, then you're not swearing on it.
I am swear. Can I put my glove on?
Yes, and you can spit into your glove, and we can shake hands.
What happened to a pinky promise?
Fine. He goes over to his bag, he pulls his glove out, and he turns away from Gore, and you just hear. He turns over, and he just very gingerly shakes Gore's hand. And
Alright,
then he
so you
takes
want
his
the
glove off.
Do you want the bad news or the good news?
I want to preface this first by saying this. I just swore on it. I also, in addition to that, want to say that I'm not going to say anything, but I also, depending on what it is, would like to strongly advise that they know at some point. But I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
I'm just
I'll tell them
putting that out there.
eventually. It'll be
I
okay.
strongly advise it. But what was your question?
We'll be fine until we get into the water. I maybe might have been bringing that to pirates.
You were fucking not!
Yep, hold on. Shh. Quiet.
You told me.
Yeah. Yep. I have bettered myself. And I'm doing the better thing. And that is what matters.
Sure.
However, if we take a boat into the ocean, pirates.
These are, I assume. What?
Ooh. If they found out I was not bringing, if I was doing something else with this item, might want to kill me. Maybe.
They're pirates.
Hey. Those are my coworkers at once, okay? They're not all bad.
That's fair. Sometimes the former coworkers probably wanted to kill you. That's
Oh! You know what I just remembered? That's
did
why I
you
was
just
hiding from those
remember?
guys on the road.
you were. Those were. I assume those were of the piratey nature.
Yeah, those are some of my coworkers, yeah.
The man with the aggressive voice and the bird creature. Those were.
Oh yeah, that was Chain Clang.
Shang
He's pretty
Flang.
cool.
That was the
Yeah,
bird creature.
Bird. Him saying it though is a lot more enjoyable. Him saying his own name.
If I recall, Shang Clang, instead of saying Shang Clang,
Yeah, they just let the chains clang.
yeah. That makes sense. It doesn't, it does not surprise, it really doesn't surprise me that you are a pirate. You're someone I look at and it just makes sense.
Probably me being able to sail a boat might have given that away too.
I just thought that it had to do with the ocean deity.
Oh no. Do not make that comparison ever. Glances over to Oldet. Ever. Don't do that.
Oh.
Not good.
Pirates
Don't compare
aren't
the pirates to Parayork. Don't do that.
Okay. I wasn't really, well, it would have made sense in my head, but I won't do that. You were going to take it to pirates, and you told me that it was probably okay.
It was probably okay.
Maybe they probably okay.
What? I mean, you don't know what they do with the items.
Probably we're going to sell it to someone for even more money. Someone that probably would have. Anyone that has I'm not going. I'm going to stop. We are off. You don't know specifically where it is we're going, do you? We're not going. Oh, that said something about home.
Nah, we're not going there.
Okay. Am I the only one that knows about this?
No.
So Oldet knows about this, I assume, because you just told me not to tell Doty, and I'm sure that you haven't had a conversation with Sapphire.
Yeah.
Okay. Then at least I'm not alone. So when you were a pirate, was it the sort of was it just trading and sailing, or did you actually look for buried treasure and things like that? I assume it's probably significantly more nuanced.
Make them sound a lot cleaner than they actually are, which I appreciate. They do acquire treasure.
And this is the first time that you've ever not completed a task.
Well, yeah. And it just happens to be that it was also one of the most notorious pirates.
Does Oldet know that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Insight check.
Make an inside check.
Mostly because I don't remember. I don't think so. Oh, that's a natural one.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Seems right.
Yeah. Makes sense. So I have another question about that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are, as you know, I'm not super familiar with pirates and where they hang out and what they do. Since we're headed into a port town, though, is there a chance that you will be recognized, since apparently you are one of the most notorious pirates in the recent age?
Probably not.
Probably.
The idea is that everybody's on the ship right now, so if we're coming up to the port and we see the Misery Promise, I will recognize it, and we will just go in the other direction.
Misery Promise. It's not a terrible name.
It's not hard to miss.
So were you the captain then?
Oh, no. No. Not even close.
Then how were you one of the most notorious pirates if you weren't even close to being a captain? Because isn't there a rank?
No. I worked for the most notorious pirate.
Oh my god. Okay.
I wish I was the most notorious pirate. That would be cool.
I misheard you. That is an immense relief. That makes me feel so much better. So everybody on the ship would recognize you if they saw you, including the captain.
Probably. Maybe. I think they would recognize a giant lizard.
You're not very subtle, and that's not anything that any of us in this group can help. None of us are subtle.
Oh my god, give me 1 second. I have to bring something up.
Oh, hello. This is everything to me.
You know when you work
Having
on
an anxiety attack right now.
You know when you work on the biggest pirate ship that exists on Yoon, and then you promise that you're going to bring this massive item and then you don't?
Oopsie. Okay, I can't find it, so I'll look for it later. So yeah.
You don't know what they were planning to do with it, though.
Nah, they're probably gonna sell it to somebody.
That's just, I think, probably the worst thing. That
Ain't the worst.
Hey, Gore.
Yeah.
Is your... Hold on, let me check. Actually, I can do that. 1 second. You can load, I believe in you. Could you make a insight check with advantage for me?
Oh.
hello? On who?
Himself.
That's a natural 20.
The more you think about it, the more you're thinking about the circumstances that surround all of this and how you normally got the orders for how this would work out. You know how most of the time specific items were requested. Most of the time, you know, piracy, the normal thing, acquire treasure, sell it, keep it, whatever. But it's when it got into these specific items that things got a little bit more complicated, specifically with the ship that you were working on. And the more you think about it, and the more you have this conversation with Arathar, the more you remember that this item in particular was specifically requested by the captain.
That's very unfortunate.
Yeah,
That's
it
weird.
wasn't...
Uh-oh.
It wasn't the quartermaster, and it wasn't the navigator, and it wasn't the boatswain. It was the captain.
Yikes. I think that wave of realization goes over Gore, and he looks really concerned for a second.
Arathar, you just watch as Gore just goes...
What is it?
Remember what I said about us probably not running into anybody? Yeah. Well, you see, this item was requested that I get it from Captain Snakefang himself.
What?
And yeah. Blue, can you find me the letter? I was looking for it and I couldn't find it.
Yes. Oh. Did I send it from this? Yes, here it is. I sent it from the other...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the other Discord.
That would be why I couldn't find it. Okay. Yikes.
So,
Just had to reread that. Okay.
So he looks like he's about to thirst. It's so great. So if your captain requested it, you still think it's going to be sold to someone?
Yeah, no, probably not. Maybe. I don't know. Probably not.
You can make an insight check if you want to.
Yeah. 15.
Snakefang was known to keep a good hefty amount of treasure for himself. That's for sure. But he was also known to make private deals with specific people that the crew never learned about. Those were deals between him and somebody else. More general deals were made on the ship, but those never happened on the ship. Other than that, who knows?
Yeah.
So maybe he keeps it for himself, maybe he has a specific person that he already has that wants to buy it. You're not entirely sure, it could be either one.
Okay. He could have wanted it for himself, but he also could have sold it to somebody, or wanted to sell it, get it for somebody. And that person's probably a big deal if it is somebody.
Hypothetically, if he disemboweled us, put our heads on spikes or whatever, killed us or whatever, however he decides to kill us, if he kills us and goes through our belongings and finds something of a similar caliber, do you think he'll throw it in with that one as well?
Arathar, do you have a bomb on you? Well, I guess bombs don't. Okay.
It's inaccurate.
You have another one of these on you.
Bombs exist, so you can say that.
Okay. Do you have a bomb on you?
I have something that can be used as an explosive.
Well,
And,
yeah, he would want that.
I may or may not have stolen it.
Oh my, Aerithar.
It also might be part of the reason why I wanted to get off the continent. Because the government that's aware that I stole it is
Who? Aerithar, who was it?
who do you think? Who did I work for?
I don't remember! I don't pay attention!
Go on.
Please don't. Hold on. But before you continue, just tell me who it is. I'm gonna make an assumption in my head. And if it is what I think it is.
I worked for the Emolith, Mr. Gore.
Yep,
And
okay, yep.
And if you're
This makes
captain,
my situation so much less worse, by the way. I just want you to know. Okay, it makes it worse, but I'm talking about it makes mine come off as less worse.
Yes, it does. And that's not something I was going to necessarily reveal until I saw where the Capitron you needed was being taken, and I needed to confirm whether or not it was a safe location, so I was going to put the one that I had on my person in that location. And quite frankly, when I met all of you, it was none of your business. And it's quite, at this point, it's become more so your business, but I'm significantly more concerned about.
Don't even let that
matter.
leave your mouth because it's not true.
It doesn't. What?
I think the Emolith is a much bigger problem than pirates.
I didn't. It was more of, well, I guess the pirates were also more.
We just don't have to go in the ocean!
I didn't bring it up the entire time, because how was I supposed to know? Then the Queen was entangled professionally with Solandra Keldov, Magnate Keldov, and Magnate Muldoon, and Magnate Yorancel, yes,
Yin Sorendel.
in
It's a
Sorendel.
weird name.
Yeah, I got part of it though. How was I supposed to know that? And then how was I supposed to know that she had a necklace that could just summon them at any moment? How was I to know that? And how am I, when we're in the capital, supposed to explain? It's not really a comparable problem. You're probably the most wanted person on your pirate ship. I'm probably the most wanted person on the continent.
Exactly.
That's not this one. Yes. But if I can't tell Dodie about the pirates, you can't tell Dodie about this.
I'm not gonna tell Dodie about this.
Dodie's over there just like, honk shoe, honk shoe.
This will just stay. The pirate thing will come up first.
We gotta tell Odette, though.
Odette can know.
Okay.
I don't.
Listen.
They
know about the other orb? No.
Okay.
Just that it exists. Because it could help them figure out something with this one.
I would like to know more about the one that I carry, which is my entire purpose of being in the capital. And why I'm not a. Anyway.
You know, at least we're in this deep shit together, huh?
So it would seem. That is why, when the cabochons are secured, I'm going to go my own separate way from the two of you, because I'm already putting all of you in enough danger as it is. And you're putting us in danger, but as we discussed, significantly a less amount.
We're safe until we get to the water, okay? Maybe. Probably.
Hmm. Maybe. Hmm.
You see a big buff Leonin? Probably don't approach him.
Is the Snake Fang?
No.
Oh, well, that's a bit. Snake Fang is a ridiculous name. I think I should mention that.
Be cool, come on.
Wow. For a pirate, I'm sure. What is the Leonin's name? Is it Rat Tail?
No, it's Krogos.
Brogos. What position does he have on the ship? Is this person someone that individually we might run into in Port Pace specifically?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yeah.
Understandable. I didn't write any of this down. What an enlightening conversation.
Yeah. Wonderful.
You do like Dodie, though, right?
She's okay. She just has anger problems.
I feel like all of us do.
I don't get
To a
mad.
degree.
Well,
You
I got mad that
probably
one
least of
time.
all of us.
I got mad that one time. Not proud of myself for it. But other than that,
Considering
being angry makes
everything
you
that-
sloppy.
I feel like constantly. Absolutely. I feel like I get the impression you are a little difficult on yourself. At times. But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that out of all of us, you do keep it together the most.
Well, thank you. I try to. It's not for myself.
Should be.
It's not that easy. And I think he stands up and starts to walk back towards his bedroll.
You make your way over, sit down, settle in. After a little bit, it's probably getting to the point where your watch is starting to dwindle down, and there's a couple long moments where you two are just off in different corners in silence. I'm assuming both simultaneously sporting some version of
Yeah.
But eventually, your watches come to an end. And it's probably time to wake up somebody else.
Gore looks at Arathar as he stands up and points to Dodie and Saphiel.
Or goes over, shakes Dodie on the shoulder, shakes Raphael on the shoulder, turns around, doesn't say anything, and goes back to his bedroll and lays down.
Dodie, you wake up. It is pretty fucking cold out. And as you kind of groggily start to sit up, as Saphael does the same, his hair is a fucking train wreck, and you know yours probably is too. But you sit up as both Gore and Erithar just immediately go to bed. And you're like, you know what? It's pretty cold out. Today's been a shit day. Makes sense. Definitely no other reason. But you get up.
It. Oh my god.
I also think this would probably be a good time to take a break real quick if we wanted to. I wouldn't
If we
mind
wanted
going
take
to
a break,
get. Sorry?
I mean, I was gonna say if we want to take a break because it's shorter, but
I mainly asked because I need to use the bathroom.
Why do I take 10?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A little short
take
one.
10. That's good.
So, we will be right back. Here we are. I think. My computer and Discord and everything is being so weird today. Okay, so getting right back into it. Dodie and Saphael have just been woken up for their watch. You two have taken your spots kind of closer to the edge of this overhang, so you have more visibility of the surrounding area, as Gore and Arathar have just gone directly to bed. You can see Oldet is still off to the side, asleep, now like halfway sprawled out, face down on their little mat thing. But you can hear them snoring just slightly, but they seem to be fully content over there. And eventually you hear Gore and Arathar settle into sleep, probably exhausted from the day, as you fell asleep pretty quickly, too. But Saphael sits down next to you, now holding his grub worm.
Yeah.
I just find him comforting.
I mean, I think it's nice to have, like, a living thing that isn't another person. It's like having a pet.
Yeah.
I've never had a pet.
I mean, look at him, he's so fucking weird.
I mean, he's got, like, no face, and yet I understand him on a very deep spiritual level.
Yeah. And he sticks to things. I don't know, I think he's neat.
He's adhesive.
Yeah. It's like he doesn't really have arms, but you always know which way he's sitting. I don't know.
I mean, he's got little legs, right?
Well, it's more like little nubs.
Yeah, like 1,000 little tiny ones. Yeah. He's cute.
Yeah. Just kind of holds him.
She picks up a stick and draws like a little tic-tac-toe board in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Makes an X and hands him the stick.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, shit.
I know this. I think. And draws an O in the mud.
Yeah, you got it.
Nice.
I wanted to kill something earlier.
It's understandable.
So bad. Got me in the fucking face.
You do have a little bit of a red patch.
Don't point it out.
Alright.
How's the magic violin coming?
I think it's making more sense now. It doesn't really function like a normal violin since it's made of light crystal.
Right?
But it's starting to make sense, I think. Actually, would it be weird if I tried to show you something?
I'd love it.
Let me put him down. He walks back over.
She'll take him.
Actually, hold on. It sticks him to the wall, very specifically. And then walks back over and sits down. Okay, so it's not really with the violin.
Okay.
Because I want to see if it will happen again.
Strange. But go on.
You know when you woke me up and I nearly shat myself and we both went, like, see-through for a second?
Yeah.
I think I kind of get it.
Okay.
So, I want to try something.
Okay.
And he kind of, like, holds out his hands to you. You two kind of, like, grip hands for a second. Okay. Hold on. I don't really particularly remember how it happened.
Right.
But I'm going to think about it really hard. Perhaps you can think about it really hard?
I will think about it really hard.
Alright. If you could make a religion check for me.
Ooh, I would love to do that. Oh, that's a 24.
Nice.
No, yeah. 4.
Hell yeah. You two sit there for a second, kind of thinking really hard about whatever you were feeling in that moment and what happened and why it happened, and you remember how for a second it was like you were looking through his eyes. And then at a certain point, you both kind of, in the middle of thinking really hard, look up and make eye contact and just start giggling. It's really funny for a second, and then you're both like, okay, no, hold on. And he's like, serious, we have to be serious. And you try again, and you're holding each other's hands, and you're thinking really hard about this. And by this point, you both have found it's easier to kind of just, like, cross and, like, hold, like, a handshake. And you're just sitting there for a second, and you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about it. And you're thinking about all the stress that was there. And for a second, you get that tingle at the base of your skull again. That kind of tingle that you used to get right before you just had the worst vision ever, but this time it doesn't feel as sharp. And it's as if you calm down and that tingle suddenly shoots up the back of your skull as if it's wrapping around the back of your head, and you open your eyes again and watch as Saphael in front of you goes slightly transparent. As if he's suddenly made out of just like a crystalline light like his violin, and you look down at your hands and you're made out of a similar sort of material. And for a second there, you kind of blink, and it's almost as if you're seeing double vision, both him and yourself. And it is a lot, and you blink again, and suddenly it's gone. And your hands kind of slip out from holding each other's.
Trippy.
It's very weird.
Might be really useful, though.
We should probably figure out how to do that.
That's on the to-do list, along with figure out how to use wings when not plummeting off a roof and or cliff.
Yeah. I don't quite know what to do with all of that.
I really don't know what it might mean, but it's really cool.
It's very intense, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a whole bunch of hidden shit to discover.
I don't think I've really let myself process this out loud yet, but I'm starting to come to terms with the fact that human is probably not an accurate word to describe what we are.
Yeah, probably not.
Ugh.
Honestly, it's probably a different sort of realization for you, because for me, it honestly makes me feel a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's like this combination, right? Because like, obviously all this magic power is coming out, and it's unsettling, like, realize that I'm not what I thought I was for a very long time, but also like, you know, maybe there's like a definitive answer, and like maybe I don't know. But, like, and there's that. And then there's, like... My grandparents are Fae, apparently.
Yeah, that'll add a layer to it.
Yeah. And I don't know what to do with that. But then also there's this other element of, like... Do you think there are other people like us?
Well, I mean, if the twins could do it,
Right.
I don't see why the others couldn't.
Exactly.
I obviously haven't met anyone.
No. But... Great big question mark.
Yeah. There's a lot to understand. And I feel like... You know when, this... excuse my analogy, but this is really the only way that I know how to describe... You know when you're a child, and...
Yeah, I know that.
You're learning to read, and, everything just looks like a bunch of squiggles on a page, and then one day you're looking at something, and you're like, holy shit, that's a word. And you can read the word, and it's like suddenly you know how to read. And it's like you've still got to work for it, but like before that, letters made no sense, and then suddenly you understood a word.
It's like that.
I feel like all of this, for my entire life, has just felt like a bunch of jumbled up letters, and then now I've read a word, and it's starting to make sense. And I'm sure that the relationship that you have with Oliel is a lot different than mine with Gier, but I'm starting to recognize that a lot of his bullshittedness feels a lot like fear.
Yeah.
It's really fucking freaky how much I relate to that.
Yeah. I think she and I have been screaming at each other for a very long time. And personally, I both have no idea what the fuck she's trying to tell me, and also don't feel like she's hearing what I'm trying to say. And I think that there's something similar going on, but it's more like a desperation to know. I guess makes sense. But I don't know.
Who would have guessed?
It's so much calmer now.
I was just gonna make a joke about who would have guessed it. The goddess of knowledge is a bit hard-headed, and the god of word and song has confidence issues.
Maybe we're a little less human than we thought, and they're a little more human than we thought.
Yeah, it's a freaky notion, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Gods, they're just like us.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Wow, man. I am really glad to both know that the dreams are still coming. Because obviously that's been my purpose in life for the last... Gestures vaguely.
Mm-hmm.
And having that dry spell was really starting to eat at me. But they're a lot less painful and a lot less scary. And I'm not alone anymore. And that's really nice.
It's definitely easier.
Yeah.
I know it's, getting close to sunrise soon, but I did want to ask.
Okay.
We're tagging along, and it seems like
Yeah.
for a good purpose. I think.
I think.
Are you getting the feeling that it's about to make a lot more sense?
To answer your question, yes. The whole reason I got swept up with these two was because the strange little pony man asked me to uncover more about the cabochon and figure out what it was and how it's connected to the gods in general and what it might be related to. And I think there's a sense of unfinished business. And if Oldet has an idea of where it might be useful and where it might be safe, then I really want to know what's going on, because I think it was sent for a purpose, and deciphering weird cryptic messages from the gods is kind of my whole thing. I need to know, and I need to know that it's safe and that it's where it's supposed to be, and I'm really hoping that that's going to put some pieces in place. Deciphering the dreams has always been the hard part. Really feel like with a little bit more information, a lot of things are going to become a lot easier to decode.
I agree.
Good.
I'm still remembering certain things. And I just feel like soon something from my memory and something from these dreams and something from reality is gonna suddenly make sense.
Yeah.
No fucking clue what it is, though.
Just along for the ride at this point, and also, I don't know, hoping for some clarity. And if it doesn't come, then the next step has got to be finding a place where you and I won't be murdered on sight.
Yeah, probably smart.
Yeah.
Probably.
Probably.
Probably good. Well, hopefully we'll get going and things will make sense and we'll get to this port town or whatever.
You've never been on a boat before,
No.
so It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the ocean is gonna be weird.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get Steve. And he gets back up and goes gets his grub again.
Okay, Steve.
You two settle back in for the rest of your watch. Were you gonna make a perception check?
Oh, yeah. Oops. Dirty 20.
Dirty 20. Alright. You continue on with the rest of your watch. Saphael kind of eventually puts Steve back up on his shoulder and does summon the violin at a certain point, and it again just kind of picks around on the strings, not really doing anything in particular. But you watch, and things go by fairly easily. The trees still creak, it's still wet and cold outside, though it's no longer raining or hailing. And eventually the sky starts to turn from that pitch black to kind of that midnight blue. It's not quite sunrise yet, but it's starting to get a little bit lighter. You said dirty 20?
Mm-hmm.
Around this point, you hear a bit of movement, and for a second you think, by the gods, I swear, if this shit is starting so early, and you turn around and see that nothing has really changed. No one has moved yet. Except for the fact that Oldette has stirred slightly and has turned over and is like leaning up on their elbow and seems to be fiddling with a piece of parchment. You kind of stop for a moment, just kind of not like trying to snoop, but also like trying to see why they're up.
Yeah.
And you watch as this piece of parchment suddenly, like, unfolds, and they sit up a little bit further, and it looks like they're reading a letter. They stop for a moment, and you watch as their ear twitches as if they're about to turn, and you kind of look back straight, not entirely sure why you don't want to be caught looking at them, but you do, and you keep your eye line back out towards where you should be watchful. Saphael, by this point, has fully gone still and is kind of like side-eyeing you, like not entirely sure what you're doing, but can tell that it's a tense situation and is just being completely still kind of picking at his violin. And you hear the piece of parchment fall to the ground, and Oldette get up and walk away from camp.
Can I, like, watch them, like, what direction they go in?
Yeah, make another perception check for me.
17?
17. After you hear their footsteps kind of get far enough that you think you can glance over your shoulder, you watch as they start to what almost looks like just wander out just a couple feet away from camp, and then lean against a tree for a second, and then seem to start muttering to themselves. Just kind of leaning against a tree and just kind of talking to themselves, just staring at nothing.
Can I make out anything that they're saying?
What was your roll?
17?
17. Could you also give me an insight check?
Sure. 19.
19. It's hard to hear this far, but just kind of glancing at them and seeing their demeanor, it looks like they suddenly got really worried and and are calming themselves down. And they stand up, and they put their shoulders back, and they sigh a little bit, kind of pop their neck, and stop, and appear to completely calm themselves back down. And then rub at their eyes because they just woke up. Kind of shake it out for a second. And begin to walk back towards camp. You kind of turn back so they don't see you, and hear as they fold up that piece of parchment again and put it in their bag. And then lay back down and seemingly perhaps go back to sleep.
Fascinating.
By this point, Sapphire has turned and looked at you.
I say we leave it.
Pluck, pluck, pluck. Just kind of... almost like plucking chords on a violin. It's an interesting sound, but very quiet,
Yeah.
obviously not to wake anyone. Eventually, the rest of your watch goes by completely uneventfully, and the hints of the sun rising begin to start casting over the forest in front of you.
When the sun really starts to get up, she's gonna start waking people. I think Gore first.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of walking over and gently shaking him
He
and leave
doesn't
him.
cough up seawater this time.
Woo! And kind of leave him to wake Oldet, and goes and shakes Arathar awake too. Before, like, going to get her stuff all gathered up.
Mm-hmm. The two of you wake up. It is cold. It is now somewhat sunny. It is morning. So,
Kind of get our stuff together and hit the road.
all right. Gore, I'm assuming you wake up Oldet.
Yeah. Kind of walks over and nudges them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. They kind of groggily start to get up again and gather their things. You see they don't go off and stretch like they did the morning before, but instead just kind of seem to be forcing themselves awake as you all gather your things and make your way back out onto the road, yes? This day of travel is probably going to be pretty boring, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask for, I'm assuming, a survival check and also someone to roll for the day.
I'll roll for the day.
Dirty 20.
All right.
A 7.
Okay. It's pretty easy to pick back up where you left off last time. Moving back onto the trail, it's a lot easier to find this time, as it seems that the rain and hail has kind of just swept away all the leaves that were covering this now very muddy piece of trail. Slightly less muddy than the day before, but still soft dirt. So you continue on. It's a pretty easy day of walking. Not a lot happening. It does get cloudy and windy again, though no hail starts up. You walk, and you walk, and you walk, and you really miss a cart by this point. As for some of you, your calves are burning. But you continue. And you walk on a little bit further. Dodie and Gore, can you give me an insight check?
Uh-oh. Natural 20.
Also a natural 20.
Huh. As you're walking, and as the chill of the wind is getting to be present again, and you're really, really hoping that the clouds don't get stronger above, but so far they don't seem to. It's just a lot of forest around you. And you kind of all fall into that pattern again of who's walking where closest to who. But eventually, after a while, it starts to kind of be a little bit more noticeable. Gore, to you in particular, Oldette seems to be, like, thinking about something. At a certain point while you're walking, they get out their journal and flip through a bunch of different pages. And kind of scratch at their ear. And eventually put it away. And they just seem to be more in thought today than they were the other day. Dodie, you glance around every once in a while. And from the other day, though you traveled mostly in complete silence, Oldette had occasionally kind of joked with Gore, or said something to Gore, or mentioned a weird tree, or something like that, you know? Just kind of trying to break up the silence a little bit that they seemed uncomfortable with. But today, your party seems to be moving as it normally does, in absolute silence. And eventually, when you guys were passing around a certain curve or something like that, you had looked back and seen that Oldette was kind of doing that thing where you're like kind of holding onto your bag and you're clearly thinking about something, so you're more watching the ground than you are watching where you're going. And it just kind of stands out to you a little bit. But you continue on. I'm assuming, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk, and you walk, and you walk for what seems like an impossible amount of time. Stopping only once to take a break and get a couple snacks from your bag and your rations, and you continue on. The wind picks up again, and the trees are extra creaky, but you're also starting to notice the change in the smell of the air. Dodie, you're familiar with the smell somewhat. It's a little bit of salt, a little bit of that sea smell, but it's not strong enough that you feel like you're going to turn around a corner and a beach will be there. You just recognize the barest bit of that smell, of that wind, that definitely signifies you're getting closer to what you're assuming would probably be the edge of the continent. But you continue on. Eventually, the trees get really creaky, and the sun starts to set, and again, it gets very dark very quickly. So. What's the plan?
Finding a spot to make camp?
Yep.
Yeah.
Alright. Can you make a... let's do a nature check for me. Someone.
Yeah, can somebody else?
I can make it. I will attempt to make it. Oh, nifty. $19.
Okay. You continue on the trail a little bit further, and by this point it is pitch black outside before you eventually see up ahead another one of these large stone formations. This one has less of like an overhang and more so just curved area off to the side that just mainly blocks the wind. You're still under the trees, but next to this stone protrusion instead. Sadly, no perfect little cave-like structure to keep you warm in the night, but it's better than being in the middle of the trail. And so you veer off to the side to start setting up camp there instead. Oldet starts to go about getting their stuff out, sitting down, kind of back pressed against the stone wall, immediately starting to get out different inks and like their journal on a piece of parchment and stuff like that, and just kind of like setting up their stuff as if they're just kind of preemptively kind of getting their stuff out for the night. Saphael walks over, as he is becoming a habit to do so, and sticks Steve against the stone wall and goes about his little habit of getting his stuff out.
Dodie kind of settles down after a little while. I'll stay up first.
Arthur nods and kind of rolls his bedroll out. He doesn't take his journal out or anything. He just lays down, facing away from everybody to go to sleep.
Well, it looks like they're about to stay up, right?
Yeah.
I think Gore kind of sets up his bedroll, kind of looks over the Doty. Well, then I got first watch if you want to go. Or you can stay up.
I'll stay up.
He does set up his bedroll kind of next to Oldet.
Mm-hmm. By this point, you're setting up your stuff, and Saphael has set up his stuff and is looking back at Doty.
And she goes to settle in.
Oh, he was kind of motioning, like, do you want to stay up with them? Or do you want me to stay up? Or he's, like, looking like he's, like, trying to decide if he should go to bed or not.
She kind of, like, eyes Gore and Oldet and decides to go sit up, but off to the side by Saphael, kind of like keeping an eye on them, and if it looks like they've got it, she'll just go to bed, but otherwise just kind of staying conscious separately.
There's this moment where it's like a who's gonna fall asleep first standoff, where Saphael has kind of like basically set up all his stuff to go to sleep, and Doty, you're kind of sitting up and just looking around. By this point, Oldet has just immediately dove into like scribbling things out in their notebook and does not seem to be going to bed anytime soon. Yeah, poor guy. Saphael is laying down, like, staring at the stars, clearly trying to stay awake, and eventually just nods off. Gore, are you also participating in this little standoff for a moment?
Gore's staying up, like, purposefully to do... He is going to stay up and do first watch.
Okay.
I think when it becomes like abundantly clear that Gore's not going anywhere anytime soon, she'll roll over and go to bed.
Mm-hmm. All right. You fall asleep, kind of like, whatever.
Why are people being weird?
And you fall asleep fairly easily. Gore, you hear the sounds of Oldet still just scribbling away in their journal by this point.
And Gore kind of leans over, acting like he's reading. Not able to.
Do you want me to turn it towards you? It won't help.
Yeah, I know. You got something on your mind? What's up?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably like a couple different things. Oh, I did kind of meditate on what you were talking about a little bit.
Okay.
Let me find it in my notes. Hold on. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's up here. Duh. Okay. And they flip to a different part in their notebook.
I think I remembered something while I was meditating. Because you were asking about like what I could remember from like when we were taught in like, school stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like obviously like there aren't like a lot of books. We weren't big on reading.
Yeah.
But I remembered, like I said, something about like after the convulsion. Because like when the convulsion was happening with the banished gods and the ruling six, and like obviously Yoon was very different. Because there were like still like way more dragons back then than there are today. And like all types of dragons and like draconic creatures, I guess, because like you have like the dragons and the wyverns and the serpents and all that. And like during the convulsion, I remember somebody talking about how like some of them had allied themselves during the convulsion. So it was like it kind of became a thing that like the metallic dragons worked with the deities while like the chromatic dragons just kind of did whatever the fuck they wanted. But like after that point, I think if I can remember correctly, that there were like specific draconic type creatures and metallic dragons that would like ally themselves with a specific deity or like a pair of deities or something like that. But like obviously since there's not a lot of dragons today or like draconic creatures, like most of them like died over time for like various different reasons, like a bunch of different reasons and whatever. But like if you think that this could be connected to Periorc, then maybe like this serpent is connected with that history. Or something. I don't really know where you found any of this.
Would he remember where specifically he got it?
Make an insight check.
$14.
14. Hold on. Let me pull something up. He would remember that this particular raid didn't really take place on land. He knows that it was pretty far west and was definitely north of Pyrsana. Somewhere. He knew for sure that it wasn't in the oceans below Pyrsana. The oceans below Pyrsana are very memorable. And he's pretty sure that it wasn't close to the coast. But the main thing that he remembers about it is that it wasn't really on an island, more so than it was like a bunch of rock and coral and shipwrecks that were all kind of jumbled together.
I got it kinda far west, I think north of Pyrsana. It wasn't from like a specific place, it was just in some like an area of water that just was surrounded in rocks and shipwrecks and a bunch of coral. But all I can remember.
I don't really know. Also, by it, I'm assuming you don't mean the serpent. Like the actual physical serpent.
Oh, no. Found this. Lifts up the...
That makes more sense. I know that's probably not super helpful.
Well, it's more than everything I've gotten so far. Which is next to nothing. It is very helpful, though. Thank you. But I imagine, and he gestures to the book, that's not what this is about.
I mean, partly. I mean, I did write about it.
It shows you pages that are incomprehensible.
I think I can see my name somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's this one, and just points to a picture that is definitely just a lizard. It's like a hieroglyph of a lizard.
Thought I recognized myself.
Yeah.
Is this what you were working on today while we were traveling?
I mean, it's like, I have a bunch of different pages for a bunch of different stuff, and I kind of bounce between things. So, like, obviously most of, like, what I wrote about this was about, like, from, like, yesterday after I meditated, and after I wrote down about, like, what are we calling it? The cabochon? What is it? Is that the word?
Yeah, cabochon.
Cool.
Rock.
I don't know. But, like, also about, like, other stuff that I was working on before this.
No, like what?
A couple different, like, I guess, like, I don't know, like, chaos problems that are happening not a lot of Periorc keepers. Kind of have to pick up where I can, you know? Because, I mean, like,
Yeah.
not a lot of people at the temple to begin with.
Yeah.
And it's not really like the other temples. So, I mean, Tanbag, he does what he can, but, you know, he's got a whole other job.
He kind of runs the place.
Yeah, I mean,
Sort of.
being the abbot for Periorc is kind of the own thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like there's like a couple storms that have happened in other places, and like the world's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, where we're heading, like, it's like out of the way. So, like, it's got its own set of problems compared to, like, Dire Mount. Like, keeping up with that. Versus, like, you know, we're gonna be on the water, and I've been keeping track of, like, where the storms are. Because, like, that's gonna be important to keep track of. I'm assuming that you don't really keep track of the storms anymore.
No, not really.
Yeah. So I've been keeping a list of those. Just what's the phrase that people use? Like, a lot of eggs in your basket? I don't remember.
I guess. I might have heard that one before.
I don't know if any of that makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So, like, so are we gonna run into problems when we get to where we're going, or?
I think it's gonna be less of, like, we're running into problems versus the place that we're going having already had problems.
They stop for a moment and kind of clasp their hands together as if they're kind of like wringing their hands almost. And their ear twitches a little bit, and they kind of seem to like chuckle a little bit under their breath. And you know that they try not to laugh a lot because it's kind of freaky sounding sometimes, but they tend to do it when they're thinking really hard.
I don't know these people.
Kind of gestures out towards the party.
And, like, they're coming with us, and we're going to a place that we probably need to go for this thing.
And points to their bag.
But also, I know for a fact that probably none of these people, including you or me, have ever been to this place. And that's... I'm protective over this place. And I don't want things to go wrong for it. And I can see that these people have really good intentions. But I'm having a real hard time figuring out what they are.
Kind of looks back towards them. They want what's best. And their actions speak for themselves. I mean, you did say the king was a shitty guy, and they did kill him.
Oh yeah, total shitbag. Kinda
Yeah,
sad I
apparently.
didn't see.
I didn't know the guy. Pretty cool, actually. Don't tell them I said that.
Okay. I want to take this thing where we're going because I think it will help. But I need to make sure that by helping, something else doesn't get fucked up. And I'm not sure how that's gonna happen, and I'm not sure what that means. But I just know that whatever this thing is really important. So if everybody is coming from the right stance, then okay. But I also need these people to be careful, including you.
Like, when we get there, careful?
Like, probably during the entire thing, but, like, definitely when we get there. Not because, like, somebody's gonna be, like, out to get us, but just because, like, inherently we're going to a different place that, like, none of these people know about, so that, like, they need to be careful.
Gotcha. I'm very good at adapting and overcoming, so. And I'll make sure it gets done. And I'm sure they'll do the same. Because I owe you one. Also, still got a soft spot for Periork, but that's a whole other conversation.
I mean, I feel like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that you're, like, thinking things through. With everything, not just, like, with this. Gestures to the bag. You know, like, with... Just in... I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Like, Like how thinking things through.
I don't know, like with your life and your serpent and whatever the fuck is happening with the pirates.
Ah. I'll deal with that when it gets to it. It will be a test of might. I'm sure it's inevitable.
I'm probably gonna go meditate again. See if I can remember anything. But
Okay.
I'll keep an eye out too, I guess.
Okay.
And they stand up. Make a perception check.
$16.
They do have their journal stuffed in one pocket and a different piece of parchment stuffed in the other. But they get up and they walk out kind of into the woods a little bit and sit down and start meditating. Is there anything you're doing during your watch?
No. I think he'll go train. Are they just meditating, or does it look like they're writing things? And like,
What was your role?
I think it's 16.
16?
16.
They don't pull their journal out. You say you get up and go, like, work out and shit like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do see they are sitting there meditating, like eyes closed. In their hand, there is a piece of parchment. Just kind of like holding on to it, but sitting there meditating.
Would I be able to see if it's not written in their language?
Make another perception check.
That's a 19.
19. I'd say 19. I'd say as you're walking back to camp or from camp, one of the two, as you're kind of passing by, you look over and you don't see, it's a folded piece of parchment. And from the bit that is kind of facing up between their thumbs as they're kind of holding it like this on their lap, you don't see any words, but you do see what looks like a, almost like a charcoal drawing of a vine with thorns on it.
Can I make some sort of check to see if I recognize that?
Make an insight check.
Back-to-back bangers. An 18.
All right. Are you just making an insight check on whether you recognize this? Or are you also making an insight check on Oldette? Like, what all-encompassing are you trying to figure out in this moment?
I want to do an insight on the vine to see if I recognize it, and I also want to insight Oldette.
Okay.
I can make another one for that as well,
What was your...
if I need to. It was an 18.
If you would like for that to count as both, you can, but if you would like to try to make a higher roll, you can do a second one.
I'm taking the 18.
All right.
I got +0.
As you go over to do your training and as you're thinking about everything, you've seen drawings of vines before. You don't ever remember one of those drawings having a meaning. It was a really simple drawing too. Not like their little hieroglyphics that they write, but like an actual like charcoal drawing almost. Simple but sketchy and clearly defined. But you can't think of something that's memorable that has that iconography to it. As you pass by and walk over and kind of try to take another moment to look at Oldet, one thing you do notice is how much older they look, despite still being nearly the same size with nearly the same spots that they had before. Their ears are still too big for their body, they've still got their childhood spots, they're still scraggly around the edges and still not as tall as a knoll should be, but they look older now. Their braids are longer. They've got more definition around kind of their snout area, and with their eyes closed, you can still see from a distance how their brow is furrowed. They just look tense and worried. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that since you've seen them again in Srenmore, that tenseness to them has kind of been there the whole time. But now it's just really apparent for you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the sense that they were lying to you about anything, but they just seem tense.
Okay. I think if he finishes before they do, he's just gonna sit on his bedroll and wait for them to get back. That is kind of next to theirs.
Eventually, they return as well. That piece of parchment, again, no longer in sight. As they unload their journal and parchment and a quill that was just kind of stuffed in their pocket back into their bag and set up their stuff to go to bed. It's getting to the point in the night where you probably should start waking up somebody.
I think he's gonna stand up and kind of look at the others and then kind of take tiny steps over to Oldet as they're getting ready for sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Oldet.
Hmm?
You're not keeping something from me, are you?
What would I be keeping from you?
You are a keeper.
I guess that's part of the job description.
Yeah. That's nothing. He's
Alright.
gonna wander over to probably to Dodie. Kind of kick her shoulder.
You get stirred awake. Saphael, you kind of wake up, eyes opening, and see Saphael absolutely conked the fuck out next to you. And you roll over and see Gore kind of standing and just waving at you a little bit.
Morning. Points over to Saphael. I'll go get Arathar.
Thank you.
wanders over to Arithar and kind of shakes his shoulder. Good morning.
Kind of pulls himself up. Good evening.
And then Gore wanders back over to his bedroll. He goes to sleep.
She sits up and kind of like stretches out before getting up and going to move to a more vantageful spot.
Similar, he kind of situates himself to where he can get a better view.
Mm-hmm. You kind of...
Just because I'm curious, how far away from her is he sitting?
I'll take it. He's not like far enough. He doesn't ever like stand up and sit next to her.
Yeah.
Sometimes most of the time he'll probably be within the same area, just so they're both looking at the same things. He's probably a little bit further away from that, but not like a ridiculous amount. He is sitting down and he's not writing in his journal, but he takes out his journal and he turns to the first page and as he's looking up every now and then, he's just reading it.
God.
But I'm gonna go ahead and make a perception check. Yep. That makes sense.
Yes.
Oh boy. That was a 7.
A 13 and a 7?
Yeah.
Alright.
Uh-oh.
You two sit up a respectable distance apart, both off to the side so you can see around this ginormous piece of stone that is sticking out of the ground, kind of blocking the wind from you, and also down the trail the opposite way, and further around in the area near you, kind of keeping an eye on everything. Dodie, you do see Arithar pull out his journal and just start to read it.
Top to bottom.
Yep. But it's quiet out, it's cold, it's slightly less damp than it was before, thankfully. And that little bit of salt on the wind is still apparent to you. But
I fully think she picks up another stick and starts drawing in the dirt, kind of whistling under her breath. Something that she's heard Sapphire play recently. Just making noise, apparently paying zero attention.
the dirt is at perfect drawing dampness. It's not too wet that it like sludges, but it's not so dry that you can't scrape into it. It's like the perfect texture.
She kind of like starts drawing Arithar, like looking up every once in a while, trying to get like the angle of his chin just right. She's not good by any means, but she's trying to at least imitate him. Fascinating.
Arithar, you do probably notice her intently staring at you every once in a while, and then drawing in the dirt, and then staring at you, and then drawing in the dirt.
He probably, when she starts to draw, kind of glances over at it, but then glances back at what he's doing. And does she say fascinating?
Absolutely.
He does kind of look over at her. She says something and then look. And is it obvious that it's him, or is it?
I think
could
so.
it just be?
It's a very pointy face with like shoulder-length hair, sitting against a rock and looking at a book.
Big pointy ears.
He's staring at it.
She like reaches down, or like she uses her foot to kind of smudge the nose back out and try it again.
Very flattering.
Is the author good at least? Kind of gesturing toward what he's reading.
There are some inconsistencies, but it can be amended in further editions.
Inconsistency can be good. It means you're learning more things.
In certain cases,
Sometimes it's just annoying.
more often than not.
I'm really bad at drawing hands. I'm sorry. I really gotta focus on this for a second.
You could just draw somebody else.
I'm not gonna draw somebody who's asleep. That's just creepy.
Yes, but also, it's your judgment. I think carry on.
What do you think?
I said I think consent is important, but if you were drawing someone who was asleep, consent wouldn't be brought into the conversation at all, because they're asleep. They wouldn't know until they were awake, or maybe they would never know till they're just going to spend their entire life on knowing.
Yeah? And that's less than ideal. People should know things about themselves. And besides, you don't take this the wrong way, but you've got some really interesting shapes going on.
I'm not sure what way to take that. I think we need like further elaboration.
You've got these like really strong facial features, like these really high cheekbones and this like perfect jawline, and I mean, Gore's a little bit harder to draw because you have to do him like face on, like, you know, you have to do like head on to like really get all his features because of the way his head is.
Well, he's a bipedal lizard.
Exactly.
That's
not
difficult to draw, I feel like, even if you were an artist.
Exactly. And I'm not going to draw all dead because I barely know them, and I mean, I know what he looks like. And you've got really nice, like, colors and shapes, and not that I'm coloring it, but you're nice to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just turning the pages again.
Have you learned anything interesting about the cabochon from Aldette?
Well, our discussion yesterday, that you probably heard, their own language, it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I am going to... They're going to record their knowledge into mine. journal, and I'm going to keep it for my own. I'm sure we'll know a lot more whenever we get to wherever we're going, and I'll have more opportunities to speak with them. But aside from yesterday, no. It was the day before. Good gods.
It's all running together. When we get out of the woods, I really want to sit down with it and see if I can figure out what makes it tick. But I don't want to be around any really strong plants or wildlife when that happens.
Be on a beach. Probably somewhere you could go.
Yeah.
To be away from such things.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we'll figure out transportation when we get there. Not to really discuss that. We might have enough gold to purchase a boat, but I would rather not purchase a boat. I'd rather have somebody take us or rent one.
Right? I guess it depends on how, like, secret this place is.
They haven't really said a lot about it, but
No.
I'm not really asking questions.
No.
I feel significantly better about this avenue than any others I've tried to find regarding the subject.
Good. Is everything okay?
I'm just very anxious to get where we're going.
I'm really optimistic. I think this will be good, and you know, I've never really spent a lot of time on the water, which I'm really excited about.
That is an opinion to have.
You're not the first person in history to get seasick. So
I did not say that I was.
I know, but you had this like really scrunched, embarrassed face going on.
This feels just very final to me, which is a relief.
Get it safe and sound someplace.
Just turning pages.
Kind of falls back into quiet, I assume. I will say, earlier in this conversation, definitely before this conversation, Gore, before you had really fallen asleep, while you were laying there hearing the movement of your party members and dozing off initially into that first little bit of unconsciousness, you don't feel the sense of darkness folding over you so intensely. But instead, as you start to drift off, you just get the barest little flickers of something else. Just the light image of open, dark water. Broken stone sinking around you. For a moment you swear you feel and hear explosions above. Before you eventually finally drift off into slumber, you're unsure if you imagine it or not. But for a moment you feel like you hear something. Closer. Worry not of that above. Closer. And you fall asleep. Surprisingly not fully into a dream again, but instead just into dark sleep. Unsure if you imagined what you just experienced. Dodie and Erithar, you go back to the complete silence after your conversation. Dodie drawing a couple more pictures in the dirt, different things. Erithar, you flip further and further into your book. The wind again picks up at some point. You can hear it howling past the stone around you. But it's kind of fallen into this awkward sort of moment where you're both really cold and really chilly, and the wind is picking up again, and you're doing your separate things and trying not to draw too much attention to what you're doing each. And it starts to get lighter out. The sun rising slightly. Both of you kind of still giving it a little bit of time before you start to wake up your party members. Just waiting a little bit longer in silence. Before eventually, it's as if you both kind of suddenly become aware of something. Neither of you had realized how you had kind of zoned into what you were doing and hadn't really looked up in a while. But suddenly, as if just a chill ran down the back of your neck, as if suddenly there was more wind coming from a direction that it hadn't been coming from before. And then your ears pick up on it before your body does. The sound of stone cracking. And the feeling, then, of the earth behind you rumbling slightly. Suddenly, you feel the rush of wind now coming from an exposed piece of rock, as behind you, this monolith of stone that had been protecting you from the wind has started to crumble down towards where your camp is. Huge pieces of stone tumbling over each other, cracking. Giant pieces of stone breaking away as you both suddenly look back and look up as a ginormous, massive piece of limestone begins to descend over top of you. What are both of you doing as this huge monument becomes crashing down around you?
Going to rush to... Is it just the limestone, or is it several pieces?
It's like, you guys, you know... About to make a really specific reference. You know in Chihuahua,
Yeah.
that big old piece of stone that everybody climbs to the top of, that kind of points out like a pie piece. You guys had made your camp next to that giant piece of stone that was sticking out of the ground, so it shielded you from the wind. The top part of that giant piece of stone has broken off and started to fall directly to where your camp is. Other pieces of little stone have broken off as well, but it's like as if suddenly this piece of rock that had been protecting you is now sliding down on top of you, and it's moving at like fractions of a second.
Aerothar's moving towards Gore and Aldette and is shaking them and also simultaneously kind of pulling them forward after grabbing his bag, yelling, "Move! Get up! Move!"
You have the amount of time to do about an eighth of that. Dodie, what are you doing in this moment?
Oh, God. Shit. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that I really wish I was a caster right now. But instead, she is going to not even try to wake him. She's fully just going to, like, pull Saphael out of the way.
Okay. Aerithar, you turn suddenly, looking as this piece of rock is descending quicker than you know what to do with. As you look up and see where Gore is laying, and where Dodie to your side has immediately grabbed the ankles of Saphael and is pulling him as quickly as you can out from underneath this rock, though it is descending way too quickly. Aerithar, you start to get up to start to wake Aldette and Gore and look up and make direct eye contact with Aldette, who is already awake and who has stood up by this point. You watch as the rock descends, Dodie, as your heart beats faster and faster as you see the trajectory of this rock start to descend into what can only be the absolute slaughter of everyone here. As you start to pull Saphael, hoping, nearly praying for him to just get barely far enough that it won't land on him as he starts to wake up. Aerithar, you look up, reaching out towards Gore, as Aldette closes their eyes and lifts their hands up towards the rock. Aerithar, you have a split second to do something else. What are you doing?
Is there any way that I can either make a strength check to try to drag Gore out of there, or is there any way I could try to do Starlight Step and grab Gore and teleport out of there?
Can Starlight Step bring another person?
It says you can magically teleport up to 30 feet.
I think only Dimension Door can do that.
You can either try to grab Gore, or you can Starlight Step. But you can't do both.
He'll try to grab Gore.
Okay. I want you to make a dexterity saving throw.
$16.
16. Dodie, you pull Saphael a little bit further as Aerithar, you start to get up onto your knees, feeling everything start to move in slow motion as you reach out towards Gore, towards his wrist, trying to grab any part of him as you look up one more time and watch as Aldette seems to just stay steady as if the rock is just going to descend down on top of their head before they finally push their arms further upward, and you watch a blast of air extend from their palms as they catch the rock in their palms. Gore, you wake up as Aerithar grabs and drags you as you watch suddenly above you as you wake up out of nothing, there is a rock still descending down on top of you. Oldet is slowing it ever so slightly as they push up against the rock, as if holding it on top of their shoulders as you look up. But Gore and Arathar, you are both moments away from being crushed. Arathar, you have woken Gore. Gore, you have a split second to do something. What are you doing?
How big a rock we talking?
Like, this thing weighs probably close to 10 pounds. Not 10 pounds, 10 tons.
I have an idea. Oh boy.
You have a split second.
Yeah. He is going... He's gonna immediately look and clap his hands at it, and he's gonna cast Thunder Wave at the giant rock and try and shatter it.
Okay.
If that would fucking do anything.
Are you moving at all as you do this, or are you just doing this directly above you?
So Odette is like right next to me, right?
Yeah. Running out of time.
He's gonna... Fuck, man. He's gonna step back and then do it.
Alright.
A little bit. Not too much.
With Arathar up onto your feet. As Arathar, you stumble back. Just in this split moment, again, as if everything is moving in slow motion. As Gore, you try to bring your hands up to clap them together. I need you to make a dexterity saving throw for me.
The 26.
You manage to get just out of the way as you begin to clap your hands together in front of you, as you watch Oldet's eyes open again from underneath the rock, as they are now fully holding it on their back as it continues to crush downward. You clap your hands in front of you. The rest of you watching as the lines on Gore's arms light up suddenly with this bit of lightning energy rushing down his arms to his palms, lighting up in between his hands as suddenly this tremendous shockwave, this shattering sound, ricochets out from him and cracks into the rock directly above Oldet. Gore, you feel the impact echo around you as part of the rock, the furthest edge, crushes down directly next to Saphiel's head. As you do so, you watch the rock start to split and shatter directly above Oldet as Oldet has been brought down to one knee below it. As you watch the crack along the rock begin to form and begin to spread, you watch almost how slowly it continues to move up the rock. And you watch as the rock above Oldet splits slightly, now falling off from one hand that was holding it up, and then crashing down on the other side. You all hear, suddenly looking up, as Oldet looks out towards all of you, as half of their body, mostly their lower left leg is crushed underneath this rock. They fall to the ground underneath it, the rest of the rock splitting away, somehow leaving the rest of their body unharmed as they are now pinned beneath this rock in front of all of you. You hear them yowl out in pain, this animalistic sound, this sudden screaming sound as you hear bone crunch underneath rock as it splits. And then you hear them start to laugh. Gore, you are rushing towards them, yes?
Yes.
You hear them start to cackle out in pain above you as they... As Gore, you rush towards them. Saphael is up by this point, having the rock nearly brush against his ear, catching some of his hair underneath it, as the rest of you stand. Gore, you run up to Oldet and can see the blood pooling around them. What are you doing?
How big of a rock is it that landed on their leg?
Now, still pretty big, but definitely under a ton.
He's gonna try and lift it.
Dodie runs over to help him.
I would like both of you to make strength saving throws for me.
Thank God I'm better at that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
Arathar runs over to kind of help pull Oldet out from under it when it's lifted.
Mm-hmm.
21.
21?
25.
You both rush over. As Arathar, you rush underneath them off to the side, where Oldet's now cackling has somewhat subsided into just this chuckle that seems to be stuck in their diaphragm as their eyes have gone slightly glossy. You both push against the rock up and over, trying to turn it away from you. As Arathar, you begin to pull Oldet out from under it. Finally, after a moment of both of you straining against the rock as hard as you can, you feel it start to move, start to lift ever so slightly, and start to turn. As Arathar, you pull Oldet as they still, again, in a lot of pain, screech out from underneath it as you pull them, Saphael running up next to you to help pull them out from under it. As finally you manage to pull the mangled, bloodied lower half of their body out from underneath the rock. As Dodie and Gore, you lose traction on it and it falls back into place with a loud slam echoing out around you. Pulling Oldet back and leaning against one of the rocks, you can see where one of their legs is completely obliterated. And they are bleeding out very quickly.
Lay on hands.
Arathar is, repeatedly casting Cure Wounds.
Alright.
Yeah.
I would like all of you to add up the amount of healing that you do for this. And I'm going to see if Saphael has any healing.
I'm gonna give them 15 of my lay on hands.
Okay.
Cool.
Casting it 5 times.
And also, if I have the ability to do so, I would like to cast Bless just in case there are any saving throws that they need to do in the immediate future.
Alright. You may do so. Alright, so that was...
He also extended
Yes.
He also extended a sorcery point to reroll one of the D8s.
Okay.
$57.
57. Nice. And that was plus, Dodie, what was yours? 16?
15.
15.
15.
57 plus 15. 7 plus 15. Alright. And with Bless, that... does that give advantage, or...
Adds a d4.
Adds a d4, thank you. Alright. You rush, pulling Oldet off to the side as you begin to cast Cure Wounds again and again down Oldet's leg as they begin to start to lose consciousness. Dodie, you rush up as well, laying on hands and feeling that bit of divine energy course through you again. Gore, I'm assuming you're standing off to the side, looking absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
As Saphael also begins to get the grub off of his shoulder and squeeze it into a bottle, just immediately. You watch as Oldet starts to lose consciousness for a moment. As Erithar and Dodie, you begin to watch from below, closest to the carnage that is in front of you, as the mangled bits of flesh begin to start to mend themselves together, the blood stopping pouring so profusely, and the fur beginning to grow back over in the places that you can heal. By the time you're done, Oldet is conscious again, and the leg is probably as good as you can get it in this moment. They are no longer bleeding out onto the rock and the stone and the dirt beneath you, covered in mud as the rest of you are covered in bits of rock and dirt. The sweat on your brow starting to drip slightly despite how freezing cold it is out around you as they finally gain consciousness again, choking a little bit and coughing up a small bit of blood as they start to heave, getting breath again into their lungs as you have put their body back together as much as you possibly can. They sit up slightly, though you kind of urge them not to move too much as they start to look around and look up towards the rock that had nearly just crushed them. They stop, that chuckle kind of returning quietly and lowly somewhere in their chest, as they look out towards the rest of you and blink. They then look down to where their blood has spilled everywhere and is all over your hands, Dodie and Erithar, and suddenly seem as if they're incredibly worried and start to look around and reach for something. Frantically, they start to turn over to their side as if they're going to crawl over towards where their bag is still partially crushed under a different piece of rock, as they are clawing against the dirt over towards their bag.
Hey. No. Stay put. Gore, grab it.
Just gonna walk over to their bag, kind of lift off any rubble that's on top of it, and pick it up.
You
bring it over.
Bring it to them. They immediately snatch it from your hands and start rooting through it and pull out that embroidered handkerchief from before, reaching out, grabbing at your wrist, Dodie, and immediately wiping as much of their blood off of your skin as possible. Still not saying a word, still chuckling to themselves slightly, just frantically trying to get as much of their blood off of you as possible. Still not quite meeting your eyes.
It's okay. I can find some water or something.
It needs to get off of you as quickly as possible.
Erithar has walked over towards a tree, away from everybody, and is facing away and is trying not to throw up.
Mm-hmm. They finish wiping off as much of the blood off of you as possible, Dodie, and then frantically start to look around for Erithar and see as he has walked away. And they look like they're about to try to get up, I'm going to be honest.
Arathar, get over here.
He turns and walks over, very dazed. And I assume he can see that they're going to try to start to get up.
Yeah. As soon as you get closer, they stop where they're trying to get up and pull you down by your shirt and immediately start to wipe the blood off of your skin.
Do not do that. Do not do that.
It needs to get off of you.
Do not get up. We will help you up. Do not do that.
Wash the blood off.
She's going to retrieve her water from her bag. Kind of like uncork it with her teeth. And use it to rinse herself off the best she can before handing it over to Arathar.
He slowly takes it and washes it off of his hands, not making eye contact with Olta, before handing it back to Dodie.
You wash the blood from you, handing the handkerchief back to Oldette as they wring it out in the water that you pour out, Dodie, as clean as they can get it, before starting to wipe it across their face and settle back against the stone that you have laid them against. They look up and make eye contact with you, Gore. And it's just this blank stare. And I think that's where we're going to end it tonight.
That was so stressful.
I know we ran a little bit longer than I was intending to, but we had to finish that. Because that was certainly a way that it went. That was quick thinking from some of you because Oldette rolled a natural 1.
Oop.
Oh boy. Well, I think we're going to probably sit here for a second. So I'm probably going to turn the stream off. And then we'll do stickers because I feel like stickers are definitely earned today. So we will be back soon. I'm definitely posting the memes that we put in the Discord channel onto the TikTok soon, because they have to. But I think that's where we're ending it here tonight. So we'll be back with whatever's happening now next time. Bye.